Beginning in the 1970s as a mail-order catalog, the Surfcaster has long been known as the source for hard-to-find surf fishing gear, and I've been personally shopping with them since the 1980s. They offer honest advice and the best recommendations regardless of your experience level, and will tailor their suggestions to what you actually need.
As you would expect from a business that's been serving the surfcasting community for 50 years, their prices are competitive and delivery is always quick and secure. They want you to have the best possible experience in the surf and have the knowledge and inventory to put the right gear in your hands to make that happen. So check out the Surfcaster at www.thesurfcaster.com, and if you're in the area, stop into their brand new brick and mortar store in Shelton, Connecticut. Welcome back to the Surfcast Podcast, and welcome back to me. I'm back after a few weeks off. Thanks for those who sent me some messages. I'm fine, and I'll just leave it at that. I'm here. I'm glad to be here. Toby, I'm glad to see your smiling face. Well, you're not smiling right now, but there you go. Now you're. Yeah, great. You know, Toby, obviously we've been fishing. I've been doing some different stuff, which maybe we'll talk about that in a few episodes, how our season goals are going. But one of the things I've been doing is some chunking. And I have to say, and this has nothing to do with today's episode, but I have to say it because it was just on my mind before we started. There are a lot of things in the surf that I find extremely frustrating and that make me break out into strings of profanity that just go on and on and on. But I think one of the worst things that happens as a surfcaster, and this is only if you're a bait guy, so eels and chunking, is going to cast fairly hard, putting energy into it, and the bait flies off, and your rod just goes whack into the water in front of you. It is the most infuriating feeling in the whole fucking world. It makes me go crazy. I can't stand it.
Mm-hmm. It can also be damaging. I've broken rod tips doing it. My essentially permanent injury on my shoulder was because of that.
Yeah.
Because I tried casting so hard, and then I tried to stop the rod when the eel flew off because I didn't want to hit a rock because I had recently broken a rod tip. So I pulled back, and that like snapped my shoulder. And that was probably, it's over 10 years ago now. I went through physical therapy and everything, and there was nothing like torn or broken. They just basically said, you've screwed something up that we can't fix for the rest of your life.
Oh my God. So that makes me a little nervous, in fact, but it's the worst feeling ever. And I haven't, when I first started chunking, I was doing like, set gear with like a weight and the Carolina rig and all that stuff, which I'm not doing right now. We would break off fairly often. I had shitty gear, and it was just junk. And also, we were trying to cast as hard as we could, even
like
though
break off on the cast.
Yeah, we'd break off on the cast. I would break off on the cast, and the whole rig goes 200 yards now. It goes way out.
It's like a missile when it goes. Yeah,
and that's frustrating. That is super frustrating. Obviously, you got to retie and everything, but we didn't really know what we were doing at that time, and we were learning. This is worse. There's something about this that's even worse, because you're in the water and just whack the water in front of you. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, it's brutal. And I don't do eeling. So I haven't really experienced. I've done limited, just a few seasons, and haven't experienced it for a while. So that's been a new fun experience I've been having in 2025.
If there's a bright side to it that I always look at on those times when I do launch the chunk off on the cast, is that you're now chumming into water you couldn't necessarily throw chum to, because it usually goes a good distance. So I always like, well, I'm just putting some more chum out there.
Well, so then I must be doing something wrong, actually, because what mine keep doing is they go straight up in the air and they land 40 feet in front of me, and then I'm like, here, Sharky, come on in, So,
oh, yeah. Yeah, sometimes they'll do that to YouTube, for sure, yeah. But when they do, if it gets at just that right point and it launches, and I'm like, all right, well, extra chum way out there.
Yeah, and for me, I don't have the problem if I'm fishing the head. If I'm fishing the head, it doesn't seem to really ever happen, ever.
Yeah, it's rare.
Just that nice, chunky, soft, delicious piece that ends up flying off, So.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, very frustrating. Been a recent experience for me. But it has nothing to do with what we were actually going to talk about today.
Yeah, we're going a totally different direction.
Totally different direction. So I was thinking about this recently, sort of randomly, and I brought it up to you, and we were like, yeah, let's talk about it a little bit. So today we're going to be talking about a wad needlefish versus a quote-unquote, and I'm air quoting for those who don't watch, a traditional needlefish. And just the differences of what we think about them, and maybe a little bit about how we use them, and maybe a few tips about them. But before we do that, I think that there's become a pretty wide definition of what a wad is. It used to be a much tighter thing, I think, and now all of a sudden it's sort of like encompassing a lot of different things. So, Toby, you're better at the history and stuff, so I'll let you go and talk a little bit about it, just in general.
Yeah, so my understanding, and honestly, I didn't have a chance to. I have the exact details on it. It could be in Dennis Umbrata's Block Island, his first edition or his first volume 1 Block Island book in there when he had all the Campo interviews, or it might have been from some of the articles on Basto's site, between the different sources.
Oh, yeah, Basto's. Yeah.
Yeah, the rough concept came about in the early 80s. They had your standard needles, the thin, skinny guys, that came from New Jersey and originally from Florida that look like just a stick. Nothing else. No taper, nose and tail tine taper. But it was Campo, I believe, who had the idea to make it larger, 9, 10-inch range, and make the belly much wider. And if I'm not mistaken I forget if he went to Don Musso first or if he went to his friend that worked for Grumman Aerospace first. But there were some Grumman ones that were made, and Campo didn't like the consistency they were. So that's why they ended up going with Musso, because Don from Super Strike had the production to make them consistent. So he had those original ones made up. I believe the original batch was 60 needlefish, if I'm not mistaken. That first batch of wooden Musso wads, again, it's about a 9+ inch, 3 ounce roughly needlefish, through wired, heavy duty swivel, basically to combat all the issues that they were having early on with those little needlefish getting torn apart on Block Island. And that ended up being the basis of the Super Strike needlefish that we know of today, and that shape continued on, and they just sort of downsized it and everything. In modern times, there's a lot of needles that have that similar shape to, we'll call it that Super Strike. The skinny nose, skinny tail, and a wider midsection gets lumped in there. But in my personal interpretation, a wad needle has at least got to be in that 9-inch plus. Won't go too deep in the details, but it comes from the name of a porn star of the time frame. So you can take what you would like from there. That's where the wad came from. So again, in my head, that's why, a small needlefish, even if it's in that shape, doesn't, in my mind, equate to a wad needlefish.
Yeah, that's right. I think the wad has to be big. It has to be bigger.
Yeah.
It has to be bigger. The other thing, and I didn't intend on doing this right now, but the other thing that I've noticed a little bit, I've had experience and purchased and been unhappy with, is that some needlefish that are be calling wads these days are very heavy. There's something about equating wad, thick and long, with heavy. And I really prefer, and sometimes it's a little trickier to get, a wad that is a slower sinking or moderate sink. We'll call it moderate sinking. Mm-hmm. A lot of heavy needlefish that are similarly shaped, although often not similarly long, they end up getting put in this category. And if I could urge you listening, unless you're fishing ledge or very fast moving water or something, looking for a wad that doesn't sink. It isn't a heavy needlefish. It's a moderate sinking needlefish. I think that's really important. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. And they should also, based on the original design, if you want to keep modern versions true to the originals, is they are not tail weighted. All the weight was distributed through the belly section, which is how the Super Strike plastics, which are not wads but same shape, are essentially done, because it's an internal belly section weight chamber. But that does a lot to it. That'll get into what I'm going to discuss, the way that the needlefish is weighted as to how it's used, how effective it is, and so on. So that's another piece of it, that if you're while there's no hard rules, I mean, you're not sticking to tradition if you're, for instance, building a wad needlefish with the tail weight. Now, you might be doing that for certain situations, etc., and it might be your version of it. And I'm not saying there's absolutely anything wrong with it. Simply saying, from original design purposes, it's coming with the belly weights. I bet if you added it up, more striped bass were caught from the surf last year on plastic swimmers than any other plug. Probably even more than bucktails. The reason is simple. For generations, the plastic swimmer has proven to be a versatile, effective, and affordable fish-catching machine.
And that's where the new Hogy OG Swimmer comes in. Unlike most of the other modern swimmers that all look and act alike, the OG Swimmer brings together a traditional design with modern enhancements to offer anglers with a unique and highly effective swimming plug unlike anything else currently on the market. With a unique wobbling action, it moves like an injured baitfish, and it's a large profile, chunky and tubular, and measuring in at 7 inches. Plus, with a downturn line tie, the OG Swimmer stays shallow, making it ideal for surf anglers.
All of this is tied together in an extra hard body that's through-wired and decked out with VMC hooks and a hand-tied bucktail teaser. And just like the Hogy Needlefish, you won't find a rear hook on this lure, which is better for the fish, better for your hands, and easier on your wallet. This is all part of the Hook One platform, as well as Hogy's new core philosophy, quality for today, conservation for tomorrow. To find out more about this mission, and to pick up one of these premium OG swimmers, be sure to check out www.hogylures.com.
So actually, Toby, why don't we just go there right now, though? In terms of design, or maybe in terms of swim, what do you think that maybe is a little different, or what do you expect from a wad?
For my purposes, if I let's say reach for a wad needlefish versus we'll call it a traditional standard needlefish, I'm leaning for the wad style when I want it to swim. Literally swim, wobble back and forth across the current. You'd swear there was a metal lip on it, and that's the type of retrieve that I get, or the action that I get out of one of those wads that has the belly weights. I believe that comes down to the way essentially the weights and the wood are fighting with each other and balance, and it produces the swim. Because with Jay, one of my fishing partners, building the needlefish over the years and playing with different weightings and wood style and how much weight he was putting in and dropping the weight, etc., based off still the same basic platform, we got a lot of different swim styles out of it. And I find that wad style further, if I'm trying to, like, if it's a darter place, I think darter spots and a traditional styled wad, like the darter and the wad needlefish are like interchangeable for how I'm going to fish it. So I wouldn't go to a traditional needle at a spot that I wanted to get a darter type swim. I might still throw it for other purposes, but it's fishing it differently. I'm fishing different piece of the water column. The wads for me generally are not in the surface. They're, couple of feet down, getting on down towards the bottom also. So a straight style needle, unless you get into like a crazy heavy weighted straight, isn't going to fish down as well for me.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned, this is a leading question because it's something I want to say, but you mentioned darter water. How much current are you throwing this thing in? Like, how are you approaching that? Like, what does your delivery look like, your presentation?
So I have, again, because I sort of afforded the benefit, like I said, Jay making a lot of needlefish, not so much lately, but I still have a good supply and catered to certain spots.
Wish I did.
More.
Yeah, wish I did. Yeah. He needs to start making again.
Yeah, I bug him all the time on it. But we're too busy tuna fishing for him to make needlefish now.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as current, within reason, there aren't any spots that I fish that have too much current. Like, that's kind of one of the pluses or benefits of that style needlefish that I've found, is that they still hold and swim true and can resist, flipping out and spinning and becoming, a skipping lure in a really strong current. A couple knots of tide. I mean, I know guys that use them in the canal. Dave Anderson fishes his flat glide, which is I kind of interpret as a modified or altered version of the wad, but it's still the general style. It's got the same shape. It's got a little cuts to it, but it's still weighted the same. And he loves fishing his in the canal.
Yeah.
So whereas if I'm running in a strong current, a straight needle, I don't fish there. For me, it to get the type of swim that I want out of a straight needle, I actually need calmer water to it, or less current, I should say. It doesn't necessarily need to be calm. I can have some wave and chop and things like that, but yeah, they swim and hold true when they're done properly, built properly in strong moving current.
Yeah, and that's my experience with them as well. I got a couple of comments. I generally use them in currents that are stronger as well. We've talked a lot about how, maybe not a lot, but we should a lot, how our spots always have some kind of water movement beyond just waves in and out. Like there's some kind of lateral movement or something interesting that's not just waves in and out, for the most part, or the vast majority even. And I think that for me, a wad in that situation is actually preferable to a quote-unquote traditional needlefish, because I find they're very effective on the swing. So I'm actually swinging, but even when you're swinging a lure, whether it's the wad or anything, soft plastic or a darter or a metal lip, even when you're swinging, you're to some degree often, not always, because if you're doing a dead drift, it's different, but you're sort of fighting a little bit with that water. And like you said, some needlefish, a lot of needlefish, I don't know what the number is, will come right up to the top or near the top. And the wads in particular, I feel they just hold better, like you said, and they're more conducive to that sort of situation that I feel, and I think you would say as well, that's just more productive. Now, to that point, and this is something that I'm specifically pointing out to shine a light on my hypocrisy and something that I do wrong, because in thinking about this, I really found a weakness in something dumb. I almost only reach for wads when I'm fishing in the boulders. I very rarely, and I don't have a good excuse for this, fish them as much on this, or even close to at all. I'm not going to say at all, because it's not like I've never done it. On the sand, on an open sandy beach. And I don't know why. And I'm going to try to make an excuse. So here's my excuse. So I'm going to try to make an excuse. Here's my excuse. When I am looking at the wad, to me, it is a better mimic in terms of size. And I don't just mean the physical dimensions, but that obviously plays a part. The size, the way it swims, the profile throws, for bait that I will find in the boulders, those non-glorified bait schools, like the stuff that isn't bunker and sand eels and spearing and herring. Well, though herring actually would be a good example, probably actually, but and so it's more. It has the characteristics maybe more of something like a tog or a sea bass or a lobster or a squid or something, and that on the beaches. This is where things start to fall apart, because this is BS. On the beaches, I tend to think of more slender baits. That's BS, though. I can't even say it out loud. I can't even bring myself to completely say it out loud, because there's no reason I shouldn't be throwing it.
You think of those when you're reaching for the needle, not when you're reaching for other plugs. I think,
yeah.
For some reason, yeah.
Yeah, but it's not like it'd be one thing if I'm like, well, it's smaller, slender bait, so that's why I reach for the Super Strike or like a small Choopy or a small 24/7, the 7-inch. That would make sense, right? Smaller profile, blah, blah, blah. But when I'm reaching for like Dave's or Jay's or a 9-inch 24/7, which I absolutely love, that's a long, traditional needle, so it's not like it's a small bait, so I have no excuse to not be throwing a wad. But I do fish Dave's on the sand a lot. I'm just kind of nervous about doing that more recently, because I'm going to get sealed and lose them. And, I don't want to lose Dave's stuff because it's, so precious to me. But let me recap, because I just went a lot of different places. I think they're more conducive to that swing, to that current, which you just said. You beat me to it, actually. I didn't know you were going to say that. And that, to me, is just more apparent often in the boulders versus in the sand. I often also I'm really looking for some of that lateral movement, but maybe not quite as much, and maybe the bait has something to do with it. I don't know. It's not a good excuse. Basically, I'm conceding my own to myself here. I have no excuse, and now I have another season goal, and that's to rotate that baby back in for the sand, because again, thinking about this, I was like, there's no excuse, you know?
As you were saying, I was trying to think like my bag when I'm packing it for a sand beach, and I do still throw wads. I do throw them in. They don't get as much playtime because when I'm on the sand, I throw like other stuff. You know, if I'm on the rocks, I'm probably not throwing a bomber or an A-salt minnow or the hydro minnow. I do throw that a little bit, but it's not going to be as high up in the priority. So like when I'm on the sand, I'm throwing those things more, and in my mind, it's not even coming down to like profile. I take my sand beach time to like play around and have fun. Like I look at, what was it when Daño had said Cape Cod fishing is for fun and Rhode Island is for glory. I think he said something, I'm paraphrasing, and it's kind of like in my mind that like that's it when I'm fishing the sand, whether it's the Cape or wherever, just basing off what he said with that, where he was referencing sand versus the rocks. It's like when I'm on the sand, I'm having fun. It's just like whatever, I can try other stuff, try different plugs. I don't fish a lot, but when I'm on the rocks, it's go time. That's where I think I'm gonna have the better shot at the bigger fish, and I really want to be fine-tuned. And it ultimately doesn't really make any sense because the findings don't really build up support that all that much, because I've done equally well and equally crappy on both.
yeah that's interesting though. I sort of think of it that way as well, and I'm sure there's a lot of guys listening to this, especially in New Jersey, who are going, what are you talking about? The sand is all about serious, but I do feel sort of similarly. It's like in those boulders, you're looking for little windows and patterns and big fish, and you really got a tight rotation. And then on the sand, you're searching for fish, and you're wider rotation, and you're, more open, and whatever. But then if that's the case, then Toby, why wouldn't I be fishing the wad more?
See, the thing, like you're saying, when you're on the sand, there's still current, there's things like that. When I do reach to a traditional style, like a pencil shape, more of a pencil shape needlefish, like a 24/7, for instance, is a really good example of this. I'll use those in the way that I seem to have them rigged and fish them. They don't have as much inherent swim, meaning on the straight retrieve, whether there's current or not, there's not that wobble that looks like it's got a lip on it.
Right.
They hang and glide, but that can be really good. So if there's, I'll bring those in rotation on rocky places and a lot on the sand when I want to slow my retrieve down. It's still coming across the current, and I'm almost fishing it like a very slow, more shallow running glide bait. And like that's kind of in my mind, and I don't know why. I'm like, when I'm on the sand, that's more of the way I want to be presenting it anyway. Again, not based on any finding. It's just some weird little hitch in my brain that makes me want to do that more. But I can also think of, I'm envisioning in my head a rocky spot that I fish. It is kind of a shallow area, but that's what my intent is, to have it slowly sort of skim across the surface within a couple of feet of the surface, and it's that slow meandering. I'm envisioning it looking like that lone bunker that got separated from his school, and he's like, I don't want to show off too much, but I don't want to like present myself as food, but I'm kind of going around, and I still got to swim. And that's what I'm doing with the with that standard needle, again, like the 24/7. Or Jay made me some very lightly weighted and lighter wood wad needles of his style for that same type of thing. And it came off of that I was trying to run it shallow and more of a swim, almost like you would dead stick a 9-inch sluggo across a current. Like that's the kind of thing that I'm doing. And it ends up looking a lot like that. They swim and present like that dead sticked, weightless, soft plastic coming across.
Absolutely. And I have a spot. We've been to it many times. I've been to it a billion times. I call it Bizarro. Nobody's going to have any idea where it is based on that. And the same thing. I would actively exclude a wad from my bag there. I wouldn't even want to bring it. It wouldn't do anything for me. Yeah, maybe it would do something for me, but I only have limited space in my bag. If I had 12 tubes and I was, Lou Ferrigno, then maybe I would have it. But I, again, also want to skate it right near the surface. And I want it to be real subtle. I don't want it to be flipping and flopping because it's a more subtle spot. So, yeah. So, Toby, let's have the listeners respond. If you got an opinion on the WOD, if you've got some great experience, you can let us know. And we are interested to hear your feedback. And we will see you next time on the Surfcast Podcast. This has been a weekly edition of the Surfcast Podcast. You can find out more about the podcast at surfcastpodcast.com, or definitely check us out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, at the Surfcast Podcast.